Welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today we are going to study the topic Orientalism and thereafter the theory which has been propounded by Edward Said. This is part of paper 10 which is structured around literary criticism and theory. The lesson that we are going to look at today has been prepared by Dr. Munirul Islam. I am Shashi Khurana and would be with you to have a look at this lesson and also to try to understand and learn more about Orientalism and Edward Said. We begin with a biographic profile of Edward Said. Edward Said was born in West Jerusalem in 1935. He spent his early years in Egypt and Lebanon, and he received many awards in higher education. He completed his higher education in America, lived in America almost his entire mature life, was trained as a literary critic in America and wrote first book which was titled Joseph Conrad and the Fiction of Autobiography, and this was in 1966. The Arab-Israel War of 1967 changed the world for Said. He committed himself to the cause of Palestine and was a strong critic of Zionist expansion and the brutality of the Western world. He was especially critical of the Western misrepresentation of the Arabs and the Palestinians. He lived an active life of as a public intellectual, and he had extremely good knowledge of music, could play the piano to perfection almost. His method of contrapuntal reading, a term which has become a methodology, has come from music. He has written numerous columns on music, together with, of course, many books on criticism as well. He has also been described as the most influential public intellectual and literary critic of the 20th century. So let us look at the works of Edward Said. He wrote more than 20 books, numerous essays and articles, and lectured in universities all over the globe. His second book was named Beginnings, Intentions and Method. This was published in 1975. However, we focus now as part of this paper on his most famous book, which is titled Orientalism. This was published in 1978. Two other books in the Orientalism trilogy are The Question of Palestine in 1979 and Covering Islam in 1981. Some of his other important works are The World, the Text and the Critic published in 1983, as well as Culture and Imperialism, published in 1993. The Last Sky, Palestine Lives in 1986. Peace and Its Discontents in 1995. So you have such a range of works by Edward Said, and of course one of the other prominent books is the name of Said's autobiography, which is Out of Place, titled Out of Place, and that was published in 1999. So once again, when we look at the kind of intellectual range that has been covered by Said, we would understand how influential he is as a critic. Let us talk about now before Orientalism. The first point to keep in mind and to understand is what Said had to say about Orientalism, or in fact even why he took up the concept of Orientalism. Orientalism, according to Said, is, and I quote, a way of coming to terms with the Orient that is based on the Orient's special place in European Western experience, unquote. Now this is very important. Very often it is misunderstood that Orientalism is a term which has been generated or created from within the space of the Orient. What Said contravenes, refutes, is that, and he explains also that Orientalism is in fact a term which has been generated from the Western space, Western experience. Before Said, a number of thinkers worked on Western representation of the Orient, criticized Orientalism as a meta-discourse and tried to expose the falsifying nature of it. Therefore, Said's intervention with his own understanding becomes very important. Let us look at some of the works on Orientalism before this major work, which is titled Orientalism. Some of the works are Norman Daniels' Islam in the West, The Making of an Image in 1960. The other one is Abdul Malik's article Orientalism in Crisis, brought out in 1963. Another one is A.L. Tibwani's English Speaking Orientalism, a critique of their approach to Islam and Arab nationalism. This was brought out in 1964. Syed Hussein Alatas's title The Myth of the Lazy Native, brought out in 1977. Syed himself wrote articles like, and I quote, Shattered Myths in 1975, Arab Islam and the Dogmas of the West in 1976. So there was a whole climate, one would say, in which a lot of work was produced on Orientalism. Let us now look at the book Orientalism, which is supposed to be the objective of our study today. Let us look at the structure of the book. Structurally, the book is divided into three parts. The first part is titled The Scope of Orientalism, and this focuses on Western representation of the Orient, on Orientalizing the Oriental, as Said himself has put it. In the second part of the work, which is titled Orientalist Structures and Restructures, in this part Said attempts at an exposition of how the philological, historical and literary writers of the 19th century have looked at this. Let us move on now to the third part, in which is titled Orientalism Now, and this part analyzes modern Orientalism. It locates the continuity of the practices of British and French Orientalism in the contemporary American discourses on Orient. This book itself, the way it has been structured, brings together a number of streams of thought. Let us look at the term Orient, very important. The term Orient is often used as an alternative to the term East, but is it so? And that is exactly what Edward Said has tried to analyze. As a location, Orient / East may be taken to extend from those countries that begin with Islam on the Eastern Mediterranean and stretch through Asia. Said's Orientalism is chiefly concerned with the Islamic Middle East as the Orient and attends to the constructedness of this Orient. Now here the primary term, or the term on which draws our attention, is constructedness. That means the Orient is something which is a construct linguistically, socially, and therefore it opens up a new way of looking at the term. It is not just a substitute for the East, but it is a term which is loaded with a lot of politicization, one would say, with politics, with an eye on something else beyond just a word which means the East. Orientalism gets defined, and the three definitions as proposed by Said are: Orientalism as an academic discipline, 1. Orientalism as a style of thought, 2. Orientalism as a corporate institution. So this definition, or the three different definitions, one could say, explain the term philosophically, politically, socially, and perhaps even economically. Let us look at Orientalism as an academic discipline. The academic discipline of Orientalism emerged in the 18th century with the growing interest of Europe in the culture of the East, and persists in the contemporary world in different forms, such as area studies or Oriental studies, Islamic studies, etc. With a plethora of texts written, translated, imitated, the unfamiliar, unknowable Orient becomes familiar and known. These texts helped in the formations of certain Western stereotypes of the Orient and aided the cause of the empire. Now, this is exactly what Said has tried to, look at from a different perspective, differing from the way history has been analyzed. Said justifies the complicity of academic discipline of Orientalism with the imperial power by pointing out that the upsurge of Oriental studies coincided with the period of European imperial expansionism between 1815 and 1914. Therefore, as an academic discipline, it is correlated with the expansionist ideologies of the West. Let us look at Orientalism now as a style of thought. As a style of thought that presupposes ontological and epistemological distinction between the Orient and, most of the time, the Occident. Now, this is again very important. How it has been used as the opposite of the Occident. Orientalism, in other words, constructs binary opposition, where the Orient becomes the inferior, other of the superior West. So, this is how the term Orientalism has been expanded. It moves beyond just the reference to the East. It in fact becomes a term which integrates or which includes within itself a binary opposition. This definition of Orientalism is very expansive in terms of historical time and terms of different fields of knowledge that it encompasses, and can include almost every Western writer who wrote on or about the Orient. Let us look at Orientalism as a corporate institution now. As the corporate institution for dealing with the Orient, dealing with it by making statements about it, authorizing views of it, describing it by teaching it, settling it, ruling over it. In short, Orientalism as a Western style for dominating, restructuring and having authority over the Orient. So, once again, it is correlated with the political hegemony that it imparts in terms of its meaning. Said appropriates Michel Foucault's notion of discourse to comment on the systematic discipline of Orientalism by which the European culture was able to manage and even produce the Orient. So, the Orient is actually produced by the Occident or by the West, and as we had said earlier that it is a term which is loaded with a certain political ideology. In Orientalism discourse, the relationship between the Occident and the Orient is a relationship of power, of varying degrees of complex hegemony. Now, it is this hegemony that Said explores by layer in his work, which is titled Orientalism. Let us look now at the latent and manifest Orientalism as it has been introduced by Said. In intent, Orientalism dreams and fantasizes about the Orient remains constant over time. So what is Orientalism? And I quote, a body of ideas, beliefs, cliches learning about Orient. Its sensuality, its tendency to despotism, its aberrant mentality, its habits of inaccuracy, its backwardness. For example, Oriental dreams, in quotes, which reflect some of the unchanging nature of the Orient. In Thomas de Quincey's Confessions of an English Opium Eater, this has been made manifest. Manifest Orientalism is the Orientalist knowledge that is produced at different historical junctures and policy decisions which are based on it. Let us look at James Mill's History of British India, which is cited by Edward Said, or Thomas Babington Macaulay's Minutes on Education. which are prime examples of latent and manifest Orientalism. Let us now look at After Orientalism, part 1. Said's approach has gone beyond the study of Orient. It has provided the methodology to critique any form of cultural prejudice and misrepresentation. This has applied also the methodology of writing back to power. In today's context also, we have a lot of writing which is supposed to be writing back to the empire. So this was the genesis of the kind of writing that is being produced, the kind of criticism that is being done today. After Orientalism 1 has opened up the possibility of the silent having a voice, not only against the Western cultural hegemony, but similar other hegemonic practices in different locales. It has paved the way of deconstructing multiple other relationships of domination and subordination as well. So the book has proved most influential in the area of colonial discourse analysis, and it is considered to be the originary moment for post-colonial studies. Said's formulations have been critically worked upon and extended by Homi K. Bhabha and Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. Said, Bhabha and Spivak are considered a sort of holy trinity in the field of post-colonial studies. Now let us move on to a critique of Orientalism. After having studied what it means and also the importance and space that it occupies, Orientalism is ahistorical, which means ahistorical. It ignores the resistance by the passive. Said ignores the resistance within West. Said ignores gender difference and class difference. Said provides no alternative to Orientalism. Therefore, Orientalism is a very monolithic in its conceptions of the Orient and the Occident. So these are some of the criticisms of Orientalism. But again, these criticisms are based on a particular perspective. Through your own study, you would be able to maybe generate your own variety or corpus of criticisms. Let us look at the criticism or the critique of Orientalism 2. Said has been criticized for taking Napoleon's Egyptian invasion as the beginning point for the discipline of Orientalism, ignoring earlier examples of major breakthroughs in Oriental studies. Said does not consider the example of German Orientalism, and his theory cannot explain the growth of Oriental studies in Germany, because Germany did not have empire or empires in the East. So once again, it brings out, the forms of critique or the kinds of critiques that have been generated against Orientalism. Let us look at now the critique of Orientalism 3. Orientalists and area studies scholars rose in arms against Said. One of them, Bernard Lewis, in Orientalism and Exchange, published in 1982, accused Said of polluting the term Orientalism beyond redemption. Lewis claimed that Orientalism is pure objective practice. Said has been criticized by Dennis Porter in Orientalism and Its Problems in 1983. The title is, of course, Orientalism and Its Problems, which was published in 1983, for wrongly appropriating Foucault's notion of discourse and for the ambivalence of relationship between knowledge and ideology. Like any new work, Orientalism in its various parts has provoked a lot of criticism. The critique goes up to the fourth, Orientalism part 4. It is the Marxist critique of Said by Izaz Ahmed in his book In Theory, Classes, Nations, Literatures, brought out in 1992. Said adopts through Foucault's a Nietzschean idea that puts in doubt of the veracity of truth and ignores the atrocities of the Orientals themselves. So a very important criticism which has been written out by Izaz Ahmed. Robert Young in White Mythologist, brought out in 1990, objects to Said's offers to Said by saying that he offers no alternative to Orientalism. What about James Clifford in the title on Orientalism? He accuses Said of using the same Western tools of liberalism that he aims to criticize, and his critique becomes a form of Occidentalism. So once again, this is another voice, another writing which has critiqued Orientalism. But let us have a look at beyond Orientalism. It brings up the question of Palestine. What is it? This is a critique of Zionism, which refused to give recognition to the realities and experiences of the Palestinians. Said equates Zionist policies as an extension of British colonial legacy. Let us look at the other section, covering Islam. Said started writing in 1789, and he focuses on how Western media's covering, in quotes, that is representation of Islam. The book extends the arguments of Orientalism and aims to expose that the monolithic and homogeneous image of Islam that American media represented was a myth. So it tries to demolish the various myths which are based on false notions or on assumptions through his work. Let us look at the other section, which is the world, the text and the critic. Said suggests that worldliness of the critic is as fundamental as the worldliness of the text. By worldliness, he means affiliation of the critic or the text to the world. Critical activity for Said cannot be delinked from a society and life, and the critic should not confine himself to the ivory tower of his specialized world. Let us now look at the other section, which is culture and imperialism. Said uses the contrapuntal method of reading in his literary criticism. His essays on the text from the perspective of the colonized try to unravel the hidden imperial elements in them. Let's move on now to some kind of a summing up. Orientalism as a concept, and Orientalism as explored by Edward Said creates a completely new perspective on the way history is read, on the way the other of the Western view has been explored, has been criticized. Of course, Orientalism does not stand without a lot of criticism. It has been criticized, but those are the other perspectives which counter the perspective brought out by Edward Said. You, as the learners, would try to generate your own criticism, read both Said, which you're studying, and of course, the critics who have been mentioned in this lesson. Thank you for visiting EPG Pathshala, and if you have any further queries and if you seek information, please, you're welcome to contact the site. Thank you.